flash-filled, inaccurate, and poor fitting. A trio of feelings that I feel are more commonly attributed to this brand. So I think we need to investigate. Hey guys, it's model making time, and today we're looking at Pegasus models. Well, we're looking at one particular kit that I'm going to build as sort of the proof of my investigation, but we are kind of looking at Pegasus models as a whole. This is something that I have heard so many times. Pegasus models are the worst model kits that you can buy. But is it actually true? Is it just a fear of this brand? Or is it just something that modelers repeat when it's not actually true? I guess we'll find out. But first of all, hey, if you're new here, I'm Miss Modeler and I build different model kits from different brands and often the weirder kits. And if you're returning, hi, welcome back. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel to stay up to date on the latest and greatest videos, and if you want to join a lovely community of model makers and share your current builds or finished projects, then make sure to join the Discord. The link is in the description below, and you can also help the channel out a little bit more by being a channel member. Now, for those of you who watched my, trio of Telford videos, you'll know that I bought a Pegasus kit at Telford, in part because I'd heard so much about Pegasus kits that I just really needed to try one. I had looked at them before, and it was mentioned in my SK60 video because they'd made one of them before, but I'd never made a Pegasus kit. And, well, there's only one way to really know if something is true, and that's to do it. So I'd actually bought this kit here, the IAR 80. This is a Romanian aircraft that served in the earlier parts of World War II before becoming obsolete, and was developed into the IAR 81, which also had a dive bombing capability, ground strike aircraft. It was just kind of an all-rounder of the Romanian Air Force. I mean, it's kind of an iconic aircraft, in part due to things like War Thunder, where you can actually use this aircraft and it's actually quite good. I really enjoy flying it. So this video is going to be a bit unusual though. We're not going to go into the full history of the IAR 80 or 81, and that's because we're going to be doing another video on that for a more modern kit that is the IAR 81. So for this video, I wanted to look exclusively at Pegasus models. So I really tried to research Pegasus models, but there's not a super load of information online. It actually ended up that I had to look on a couple of different forums and a couple of sort of general business profile websites before I could find the information I needed. When you try and look it up, there's a couple of Pegasus model kits that sort of seem to exist, or Pegasus plastics, but the one we wanted to look at is based in Whitstable, Kent. Now, from the source I've seen, the company was either founded in 1981 or 1982, and that was by Chris Gannon. Originally, they made World War II aircraft, and it was particularly focusing on aircraft that other manufacturers didn't do, or obscurities. So like this Arsenal VG33 and the IAR 80, they really fit that profile. There was another brand within Pegasus, and I'm not sure if they bought this early on or if it was something they sort of built as an internal brand called Blue Max that focused on World War I models. These were a range of 1/48 scale aircraft, and from looking online, these seem relatively easy to get hold of still. There was also the Silver Cloud range that launched in the millennium. These seem to be kits that were plastic and resin, and also had some metal parts, but metal parts are kind of part of most of the Pegasus kits anyway. I'm not sure what makes something a Silver Cloud kit. There's something to do with it being more premium, maybe it's more short run, I'm not really too sure, but it was its own range within the Pegasus parent company, I guess. So as I mentioned earlier, these kits all have metal parts or pewter parts, and they are limited run polystyrene kits. I think the pewter parts are really just the bits that are more, I guess, complex if you're trying to make a tooling or something. So things like the landing gear, for example. Their goal, as I mentioned earlier, was to produce interesting and overlooked kits. Now, Pegasus models did go on for quite a long time, but unfortunately they couldn't go on forever. In 2008, they were bought by Freight Dog Models, and they've released some of the kits with updated parts, and they've continued to release the decal sets, which include the wooden decals, which if you look at my Block MB210 video, you can see the wooden decal effects that I've used, and they're really good. You just get a giant sheet, they're fantastic. And that's one of the other things Pegasus was known for, was their decals. This brand seems to get a lot of hate, but honestly, I have so much respect for them. Chris saw a gap in the market and thought, hey, I can make these kits that I want to see and build and give them to everyone. Now, the kit that I have is the IAR 80, and it was released in 1992. And my kit was one that ended up at Wonderland Models in Edinburgh. I ended up buying my model kit for the same price that it was sold 22 years ago, which is kind of insane. Now, it's really hard to know if these kits are good or bad without making them, and I've seen lots of stuff online. I think that with modelling especially, we get so spoiled, I guess, a bit by how fantastic new kits are, and that's not a bad thing, but it just means that when we have the more complex or difficult kits, which is often the case for limited run, for some people that can feel like, oh, it's a bad kit, but it's kind of the nature of the beast. So I really want to go and build one of these kits, establish whether or not these kits are worth your cash, because that's also really important. And I guess explore whether Pegasus is going to be something I build more of. But I guess the hint is there's more than one box on this table. So let's go and have a look inside the box for the IAR 80. The Pegasus IAR 80. It's an interesting kit, and the box, well, it's pretty old, from 1992, and as I say, it came with its receipt, but I do like this packaging, I'm not gonna lie. It's simple, it shows exactly what it is. If this was modern and in colour, I think it would be great. But yeah, overall the kit comes with a couple of sprues, with 3 sprues and then some white metal parts, which is the landing gear and the rear tail skid. The decals still came with their backing paper and look to be in okay condition, but the middle stripe is white, not yellow. But the wings are just one solid piece, and most of the pieces are quite thick. The plastic is much thicker than you'd probably expect from other forms of plastic model kits, but that's not really something that's too concerning. The detail is nice, especially considering, again, this is a smaller company. You expect it to be not to the levels of, say, Airfix or Revell, but I thought this was really good. You'll notice that there are some bits missing from this, so like the landing gear covers, you do have to make them, and it includes them in the instructions so that you can do so. The decals come with all necessary parts and they'll end up looking okay, but you do have to put them together, much like many older decals. And then when you get the instructions, it's just this. No pictures, just words. So now you've seen the kit, you probably have the same reaction that I did when I first looked at it. Yikes, this is a bit scary. And yeah, there's more to this than I was probably going to be comfortable with. You have to make some of the parts. So for the landing gear, you have to make the landing gear covers, which I've never done before, and that absolutely terrified me. I had a comment on one of my previous videos where I talked about this kit where I'm really sorry, I can't remember who you were, but I'll try and pop it on the screen if I can find the comment, but they said to use a tin can. So I saved some tin cans when I've had some soda, and I've used that to make the wheel wells, as you will see later in the video. It's definitely a scary kit, don't get me wrong, like, was definitely in play here. And it hasn't got to me for a kit for quite some time, I guess, since Concord. But there's only one way to get better at modelling, and that's to take on those challenges. So let's see how I did. As with any kit, the start of this kit is breaking the sprue apart, and well, it's quite thick. But it's a fairly simple kit, so you just pop the fuselage bits together, and then you're going to put the wings on, the engine on. It's all relatively straightforward. What I did find is things were just slower. And the reason for that is there's no locating pins on this model, so you do have to line everything up very manually, and then you have to hold it together for some time to make sure it sticks. I think this is just the type of plastic that it is, and potentially that it's a lot thicker. It took just a little bit longer and a little bit more glue to make sure I got a solid bond, but once it was together it was absolutely fine. It's not like it was significantly harder than really any other sort of model kit that I've made. Just takes a little bit of fiddling, but eventually you do get a solid model.
Now once you've put the fuselage together, and I used Tamiya tape to make sure I could get it together easily, it's time to just get some of the other pieces on. So like the tail control surfaces, and also what you can't really see there was me putting the engine cowling together. Unfortunately, I fell into the habit where I got things off screen sometimes, but yeah, you can see me putting the rear tail surfaces on, and there again, no locating pins, you just have to sort of hold them in place for long enough to make sure they stick. But again, once they're on, they're on. The cowling sticks onto the front of the aircraft and gets rid of sort of the weird sort of nub that's on the end of the aircraft. And I just made sure I used plenty of glue so that it would stick in place easily. Much like the rest of the aircraft, sticking the wings in place required me to make sure that I held it very still and just used enough glue to make sure it stuck. Nothing sort of too major, and when I went on again, they held really nicely. I then used a lot of filler to fill in the gaps, and I realised on the engine cowling in the end I didn't flatten it where it should have been flattened, and that was sort of an oversight on my part. But we're just going to have to accept that there's going to be some lumps on the engine cowling. But I tried to fill in around the ring roots, the fuselage joins, just sort of anywhere where it felt really necessary. I did also stick some inside of the cockpit in the end to try and fill it up, because originally it was just pretty much just an empty void and a seat, so I tried to fill it up a little bit. You also have to put the engine exhausts on, and they sit just outside of the engine cowling. Make sure you have them facing the right way as well. I use Wolf Under for reference. I needed to stick a magnet inside, so what I did was initially I started using a knife to just sort of carve it out, and then decided actually what I'm going to do is I'll stick the magnet on the inside of the engine cowling. So you won't see it because I've sort of cut around it, but I did take the cowling back off. I stuck a magnet on the inside, and then what you can see is the magnet on the outside to make sure I've got the polarity right, because I've carved out the middle of the propeller, and this was a hand done, I believe. I don't think I used a Dremel on this one, but I do have a Dremel that I now use. And I just sort of cut it until it was the size of the magnet, and then tried to get a magnet sort of as flush as I could. It's not super flush in this instance, but it does look all right. Sort of just about squeezes in. And then that means that we can remove the propeller, and if we knock it over, it's not going to break off, it's just going to slip off. As the landing gear is white metal, it's not going to stick with traditional glue, so I use Loctite here. This isn't the gel one, I don't think. That I do use Loctite's gel super glue, but really any gel based super glue is sufficient. I prefer gel because, well, Fenris actually advised me, who's another content creator, link in the description. They advised me that using gel gives you a bit more wiggle room, and I do find it is actually a lot easier to use the gel than the liquid one, so I do try and use that more now. I did actually end up breaking this one, as you can see, but I did get it together again in the end. It just took a lot of patience and a lot of work. It does feel weird because you're putting these in and there's no wheels in it or anything, but you just have to do this step by step and really just trust the process with this one. Now, I ended up using Gorilla Glue for the actual wheels going into the landing gear. I don't really know why I decided to make this distinction, but I did. I think I just, in my head, I was like, this will probably work better. Fun fact, I've used Gorilla Glue to repair a nail that I broke when I was on holiday once, so I know it's very strong stuff. Happened in a cycling accident. So yeah, I did just try and fix this back together. It did work. The gear held in really nicely, and I just sort of clamped the metal of the landing gear a little bit just to make sure it was all flush and gave it a bit more of a natural look, not sort of a floating wheel effect. And then it was time for a lot of cleaning and sanding. And of course, we mustn't forget the rear tail skid. I'm really sorry, I didn't write down your comment, but someone in a previous video advised me that I should use an aluminium can. And this is proof I read my comments. So I took one of the cans that I'd drunk and I cut out the side of it and decided I'll use this to build the landing gear covers. It was a bit of a faff, and I would recommend obviously just being really careful with this. I do have a plastic surface on top of my counter, and that's why I'm not using a cutting mat, because I was actually replacing this one because I'd just sort of damaged it already. So yeah, make sure you use a cutting mat and just be really careful, and probably wear gloves. I was very stupid. I use the decal paper because it's quite thin and porous to use a Sharpie to sort of transfer it onto the aluminium can, and then just sort of refilled in the shape so I knew what I was cutting out as well. And then it was just a case of taking my craft knife and going around and cutting it all out. Obviously a lot of effort went into this, so dry fitting is essential. I found that they were actually slightly too long, so I had to cut little bits off the end of them before super gluing them in place. Of course, again, this is metal to plastic, so it's not going to work with poly cement. I did prime this whole thing with Life Colour's old formula primer. Again, this is not my favourite primer. I love their new formula. Didn't super love the old formula, but I just used their basic grey colour, and you can see that the undercarriage covers have gone from a metal to a primed. And then it was time to do the yellow, and the yellow is really difficult. Yellow is just a really hard colour to do, and they normally get recommended to put pink or orange below it. I just went straight for yellow. I did okay in the end. I did have to touch this up a couple of times, both airbrush and with a paintbrush. You just had to do layers upon layers. And you'll see I wiped bits off where I think I'd done my mixture a little bit wrong, or I just not painted it on super well, because I know with yellow you need to get it right first time and keep sort of layering it. And in the end, I do get a really nice yellow, but this is a whole thing of just trust the process. And you can see that I've messed up sort of my mixture a little bit. All my pressure's slightly off. So I wiped it off again, and then I sort of went on really slowly, and I ended up with a nice solid yellow colour. This is just Life Colours Basic Yellow. After that was all done though, what I needed to do was make sure I didn't ruin the yellow, so I used a masking putty. I think this is Vallejo's masking putty because it was one I bought a long time ago and I don't use it that much. Just not because it's bad, just I don't use masking putty too much. And then I just went over and primed the whole model. You can see the colour change, and that all the little scratches from the filing that look like they're not even actually go down quite nicely, and the whole thing just looks quite good in the end. I'm also then able to just go over the entire of the front end as well. I don't need to worry about it too much. It just sort of seals it all in. I then coated the whole model in Dunkel Green, which is a Luftwaffe colour. It's the same colour I used on my block MB210, and that's sort of the base colour. And then I'll use RAF Dark Earth, and again, all of this is life colour, to sort of create the brown camouflage on this. I've just used some pictures online for reference, and of course we'll have that vibrant yellow tail in the front, and then we'll pop the decals on. It's quite a simple scheme. The bottom of the aircraft is an azure blue, sort of a really light blue, and for that I mixed a sky blue, I think it was the RAAF sky blue, with just sort of a regular blue until I got the tint that I wanted. I ended up painting my block MB210 with a similar scheme just because I thought it looked nicer than what the MB210 normally has, and so I have both of these looking really lovely together. And again, the curse of getting it slightly off the camera strikes again, but you can see I'm putting the brown on just at the very bottom. So sorry, it's a really cropped image. This whole build seemed a bit cast for me getting things off camera, but you can see me starting to paint the blue off and the tests that I've done on the side. This is again just a bit more intense than the regular sky blue. It's a bit more of a Mediterranean-y colour. I could have bought a specific colour for this, but I decided painting it on with a sort of a close match, sort of just matching it by eye would be best. And I also, from what I recall, Life Colour didn't have an exact match anyway, so I just sort of vibed it out. And I think I ended up with a really nice match in the end, and it looks really sweet. once we'd unwrapped the model, so taking off all of those sort of masking tapes and tidied it up, and we gave it a gloss varnish, it was time for the decals. Now the decals are kind of strips for the tail section, so you have to angle these on correctly and cut them correctly, and I found this quite hard, especially getting the red one right. And of course you can see I've painted the tail yellow as well. I don't think I really explained that previously, but it's sort of painted with the base yellow because I knew that the white strip was not how it should be. It should be sort of a Romanian flag on the tail section. I cut up the red strips to make sure I got it looking right, and in the end I think it looks okay. Could it look neater? Yes. Could I have painted this neater? Potentially, but I got a nice finish in the end, I think. I was really worried about doing the Romanian insignias because they can be quite fiddly. This is like, what, the white layer, the yellow layer, the roundel, and then the spot in the middle. So it's really difficult, and you've got to layer them up on layer. You can't really gloss it in between. But surprisingly, this was actually really easy. Using a nice brush did definitely help me get everything all aligned, and the white backing definitely also helps make sure that the yellow shines really brightly. Even though it's obviously there to provide the white outline, it kind of works a dual purpose. I just moved it around a little bit to make sure I got it exactly where it needed to be, and then I tried to push the white using the end of my brush rather than the yellow to just sort of maneuver it around. Having nails for me definitely helps with this sort of thing. It makes it so much easier because I have multiple tools at my disposal rather than needing to use tweezers or anything. My nails are perfect for this sort of thing. You can see how easily I'm just able to maneuver it around. Lovely. We then need to pit the ring around the dot in the middle. That goes on really nice and smooth, and we're just being really careful not to move the entire decal. And then we have to repeat that process on the tops of the wings, the sides of the fuselage, and the bottoms of the wings. So we have to repeat this quite a few times, and it was really difficult to make sure I wasn't moving it all around. I tried to make sure everything was as dry as possible before I did so. Once it was all done, I did try and do some weathering, and this is just using oil paints. You can go and watch my Strike Master video on weathering. Unfortunately, I think just because of how I painted it, the grooves weren't really super deep, so I didn't get the weathering effect I quite had anticipated. I did do some weathering on the bottom, which definitely shows up more, especially against the really light blue, and I tried to do that more so where the sort of gun cavities are, or where the, I guess, the ejection points for the ammunition is. Speaking of which, we need to add pitot tubes and guns, and I didn't record the first two that I popped on, but you can see how I'm doing it here. So I'm using guitar string, and I've drilled, well, I say drilled, I've just used a knife to create some little scrapes or holes to stick them in. Hold them in place until the glue is set enough, and don't do that where you drop it off. But if you hold it in place long enough, it will just stick in, and it will be quite a solid connection. Unfortunately, it's slightly off camera, but you get the sort of general gist of it. I did this for 5 different parts, so there's sort of the cannons and machine guns, and then there's also the pitot tube at the end. I will of course have to paint these afterwards to match the wings, and for the pitot tube, give it a striped pattern. I also used a guitar string to make an antenna on the canopy, and I really did mess that up and got way too much super glue on the canopy. It does look a bit messy, and it's the worst bit of the model. What you can see here though is stretched sprue. So I took a bit of sprue, I used a lighter to really heat it up and melt it, and then I just slowly stretched it out. So I got this really beautiful thin line. Now, I had an incident with my cats knocking this off. I also knocked this off where it was living, and I had to redo this about 3 times, and each time it got progressively worse. That is just something to bear in mind, because it doesn't look as good as it did when I first did it. I promise you it looked a million times better. But I still think the end result was actually really good, so I'm not too concerned. It just took a lot of time. You just have to hold it there until it fully sticks, and then stretching it, you have to be quite careful not to rip the other bits off. So yeah, just need to be really careful.
So now you've seen the construction, I wonder if you think I did a good job. And we'll obviously have a look at the grand reveal of the kit in a moment, but I really tried on this to make a good kit out of it. I guess the main thing I know that went wrong before we look at the finishing shots is the canopy. I didn't do as good a job on that as I would like to, and that was in part to get the radio mast on it. I definitely didn't do as good as I could have done there, but that's a learning curve. But it was difficult to fit, so I'm not too hard on myself for it, because overall I still think I did a fantastic job, and I can't wait for you to see the IAR 80 from Pegasus models popping off. Well, what do you think? I think I did quite a good job. And of course, having the magnetic removable prop is a lifesaver. I've knocked this over once, and having the prop not break, instead it just fell off. Game changer, especially if you have cats. Although this one's a little bit weak and does not necessarily line up as well as it could do. But this was only, I think, the second or third kit I'd magnetised, so I'm not going to be too hard on myself, because this kit was actually built whilst I was doing my French February kits this year, so it's been a while. And I tried some new techniques in this. So obviously I've used guitar string here for the guns on it. They don't come on it, although one of the bits has fallen off, unfortunately. So I will find that later and pop it back in, but that was for the one at the end here. I've also used stretching sprue to do the wire here, rather than using thread or anything, because everyone says it's a really easy way to do it, and turns out it actually is kind of easy to do. Do I think I did a really good job? That's up for debate, but no. Do I think I did a really good job with the sprue? Not sure. It's the first time I've done it, but I think it went okay. Overall, I really enjoyed this kit. I really enjoyed the build. I didn't think it was actually that hard. It was more challenging. There wasn't the alignment pins that you would normally have. There were bits I had to scratch build, as we said, for the landing gear covers and the guns, and the canopy definitely didn't fit properly, and annoyingly, mine didn't even come with a canopy, and Wonderland didn't have any others. Obviously, this is an old, no longer printed kit, so I actually had to order another one from Germany just for the cockpit. So if anyone has a spare cockpit, let me know, because I will build or get rid of the other kit, but currently it's incomplete, sadly. But yeah, I think it did well. The decals, they were quite tricky. They came in lots of different parts, but they held considering their age. I'm kind of impressed with this kit overall. Yeah, I think I would recommend this. It's a really interesting subject, and I mean, I've obviously decided I'm going to build more because I have several of the Arsenal VG33 to build, which is an aircraft I've wanted to build for a long time. And they were a bargain, so I made sure I got them. So I guess in terms of buy or fly, I would definitely say buy these kits if you get them. Now, if you're brand new to the hobby, maybe hold off. These are not going to be your best friends. But like, if you're a bit experienced, you don't have to be great. I'm not a good modeler, but I still built it and I did okay. And it was a great way for practicing new techniques and new materials to use without really worrying too much, because these kits tend to go relatively cheap, at least at model shows. Online, they are like 20 quid, and honey, no, that is not worth the price whatsoever. But if you can get these for a fiver, yeah, they're definitely worth it. Obviously, if Pegasus released newer kits, I would probably still consider them because they release interesting and unusual subjects, which is kind of my forte. So, yeah, I think this was a really interesting video, and it was lovely to experiment with a model kit that I don't think I would have ever touched had it not been one that I saw at Telford for such a cheap cost. So overall, here's the Pegasus models. Sad that you're no longer around in your previous form. I hope you end up releasing some new kits because I think you're an asset to the overall modelling community, and thank you for everything you did. Well, that's it guys. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. If you want to support the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with the latest and greatest videos. And if you want to support the channel further, you can become a channel member. You'll gain exclusive access to some emotes, which you can share during the premieres and live streams. And if you are the advanced kit level member, you'll get your name shouted out at the end of the videos too. If you want to join our lovely community of model makers, make sure to join the Discord. The link is in the description down below, and you can share your finished builds or upcoming projects in a forum style. And it's just a lovely, friendly community. And make sure you leave a comment down below as well. Have I convinced you to try a Pegasus model kit? Well, that's it, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye!
Thank you so much to all of my channel members. You help make these videos possible. This is one of the last videos in my old style. Thank you to my advanced kit level members especially, and that includes Son of a Gun, Baz P, Bob and Genevieve Albridge, David Barber, Taggers365, Jeff Dioramas, Crazy Locha, Mouse Hand, Gavin Blackburn, Marcus Cranfield, Bobby G, Giles Parker, Daffy Duck and Explosive Water. And a big shout out to the two longest time advanced kit level members, Crazy Locha and Explosive Water. Thank you all for helping make this channel possible, especially for the support recently. It really does mean the world to me. And well, if you have enjoyed what you've seen here today and you want to become a channel member too, you can do so. You can also check out my other videos and make sure to subscribe to the channel too to be kept up to date with the latest and greatest videos. See you later guys. Bye!